Okay, thanks, Brian. Brian wasn't going to say an awful lot, and the things that he was going to say, he didn't actually say. So I'm going to just quickly, before I get started on the talk, just a brief thing. Obviously, we're in the game of plant breeding rather than animal breeding, and there are a lot of similarities between the two things, but some key differences, which is where Robin's input has been fabulous for us. One of the first things is, obviously in animal breeding, you're all about predicting breeding values. In plant variety trials, we're actually about predicting total genetic values. We have varieties out there, and the name of our game, what we're trying to do is give information to growers so they can select the best varieties for growing in their conditions. So we need to predict total genetic value as well as breeding values for doing selection. The other thing is that the data that we use to do all of this comes from what are called multi-environment trials. So unlike animals, we have the luxury of being able to replicate varieties, so they're grown in field trials. So we've got the opportunity to improve reliability by modelling spatial variation and things like that. But the other big thing is we obviously have a huge issue with genotype bioenvironment interaction. That's one of the key things, that varieties just behave very differently in very different environments. So a lot of our work focuses on that. So as I say, that's the area of work that we're involved in. And what I'm about to show you is some of the work that we've done collaboratively with Robin. It's just a potted history. There's a lot more to it than what I've got on these slides, but it will give you a flavour of the sort of work that we do and how Robin has helped us. The title will become a little bit obvious later on, but it's all about the work we do with the Australian grains industry. And the way I'm going to do this is going to be sort of a walk through time. And starting really with when Brian first met Robin, which I believe was in Adelaide, South Australia, and it may have been a dinner for honouring Graham Wilkinson, I believe. So back in 1984. Professionally, Brian's link with Robin started when he had a project funded by the Grains Research and Development Corporation of Australia, which is our major funding body for plant research. And what he was doing was taking information on wheat variety trial data. In fact, Arthur mentioned this in his talk, and wanting to do an analysis that it was too big to run in GenStat. So this was around about the time when Robin gave Arthur the idea of average information. And Arthur did mention that there was a paper to this, but Brian's version of the story is a little bit different, because he talks about the fact that Robin actually locked the two of them in a dungeon somewhere at Rosalind for a week and wouldn't let them out until this paper was written. And as a result of it, that is the paper down the bottom there, which obviously has been the basis of a lot of software packages, including ASReml, and has made fitting large, complex mixed models possible. In terms of that GRDC project, two really important papers came out of that in this series that I've got up here. And it was obviously the application of using average information to be able to estimate variance components in this pretty large multi-environment trial data set. In terms of my involvement with Robin, I didn't meet Robin till quite a bit later on the scene. I was a PhD student of Brian's, and I had just presented a talk at the International Biometrics Conference in Amsterdam, and I'd actually presented this work somewhere else. And then we went to visit Robin at Rothamsted, and we were sitting in the Fisher Library. Brian and Robin were up the back talking, and I was sitting at the front, and all of a sudden Brian says, "Hey, Robin's talking to you, come back here." So I came back, and this work that I'd literally just got off the plane presenting, Robin sort of makes a polite little comment. He says, "Oh, it's not invariant, and there's a flaw with what you're doing." So for the first time in my career, and it has happened subsequently since, Robin has taken a look at something and decided, well, actually, it's not such a good thing after all, and you're going to have to go back and try harder, which becomes a comment that you'll see later on. In '98, Brian had 3 months where he lived in Harpenden and spent a lot of time working with Robin at that time. And then one of the very early papers, I think we said that previous analysis of the multi-environment trial data was what's called a two-stage analysis, where you get means from looking at individual experiments, and then they go into the second stage, which is an across-site analysis. This 98 paper with Bev Gogol was one of the first attempts at doing what we call a one-stage analysis, so individual plot data combined across all the trials. It had a variance component model for genetic effects, or a genotype main effect, and a genotype by environment interaction component. And at the residual level, spatial modelling to help get rid of the noise. Following on from that is the paper that I was involved with and came out of my PhD. Similar idea, one-stage analysis, but this is the first time we started using factor analysis models to model genotype by environment interaction. It took quite a few attempts to actually get this thing published, but it forms the basis of the methods that we now use and everybody else uses in Australia in plant breeding programs, and also in our national variety testing setup. The dates here are actually the dates of publication of these papers. So with our factor analysis models, as Arthur alluded to, they're difficult to fit. There are situations where you can have reduced rank models, and the formulation we were using to fit them was what we called a dense formulation. So Robin came up with this very, very clever idea of a sparse formulation, which allows you to not only fit these reduced rank models, but speeds up the process enormously. It's a paper that no one has ever cited it. I don't think anybody actually really understood it, but it's very fundamental, this concept of this extended FA. It's fundamental for us being able to actually conduct these analyses. Some other key papers which were revolving around things in ASREML, which was all about methods for predicting from linear mixed models. So complex predictions involving fixed effects, random effects. It's always a very difficult area. And once again, Robin came up with some amazingly clever ideas, particularly about estimability of functions which are going to be predicted, and also some clever tricks about using the standard mixed model technology to actually do those predictions. And it has pretty much revolutionised prediction from linear mixed models. A paper that was written on a visit to Rothamsted. It was actually it was a dedication to Rob Kempton, and it's an overview of mixed model approaches. It's one of those papers that it's been very highly cited, but it's just a nice overview of current approaches, and it contains lots of information about different models. But one of the big things in this paper is a discussion about fitting variety effects as fixed or random. And for animal breeders in the audience, they won't even contemplate why someone would want to fit variety effects as fixed. However, that's been the history in the plant breeding world. And Robin always came up with this wonderful comment that the use of random effects is what we need to do, and it's for the common good, is what Robin would always say, because growers really just want to know about the best varieties for their situation. They want to select the best, and it doesn't matter whether it came from this company or that company, or it was called this or that. So this comment, we've used again and again to try and move right away from that fixed effects scenario. Robin also had a lot of work with Ari Verbeler and Brian in the detection of QTL. So this idea of using the full linkage map, all markers fitted at once. A lot of the work here was built on work that Robin had done previously. It's implemented in an R package which uses ASREML in the background, and some PhD students were also involved in some of that work. In 2009, we've got another paper which is involving our FA methodology, but now in the original paper we had independent variety effects, but then as we moved on, we realised that it was important to be using pedigree information, so numerator relationship matrices, or that A matrix could be a marker-based matrix. But this paper gave the theory for actually being able to implement the XFA technology in that setting. Then a couple of papers which had, this off-the-wall ideas. In plant breeding and variety testing, a lot of the traits are very expensive to measure, and so if you've got a fully replicated trial, it becomes expensive to measure that trial. And these ideas here are about using mixtures of composite material, so compositing material from different plots, and being able to still conduct an analysis and maintain the information on where the individual location of those plots were in the field. So it's using some clever AS-REML techniques to be able to do it, and some interesting ideas. It's now being picked up quite a lot by practitioners because they can see the value and obviously the huge cost savings. Robin was actually an author on the first paper. On the second paper, I believe he was our anonymous referee because he made us go back and do an awful lot more work to get it, and it resulted in a much improved manuscript. A much more recent paper, which is now not to do with grains, but to do with trees, which are much closer to animals, obviously. And it's an attempt to, looking at genotype bioenvironment interaction in trees, in radiata pine. And it was an enormous data set, and in order to get around some of the computational burden of fitting a full animal model, then Brian came up with the idea with using an approximate reduced animal model, so there's an approximation as well, and in conjunction with the FA to model the genotype bioenvironment interaction. Once again, Robin had a very elegant idea about predictions for forward selections using just using the mixed model technology. And although that's not actually a grains application, it does have application in the grains industry. Okay, so this is where the try harder comes in, that there's still work in progress, and we're hoping to make some progress with this. A lot of these things, outlier detection was based on some work that Robin did quite some time ago with the alternative outlier model. We dabbled for a while in trying to work out better ways for model selection, selecting different spatial models or genetic models. And we had a method about fast leave one out residuals we called FLU, but Robin didn't like that, so that one's been left on the floor, so to speak. Estimation of singular variance matrices is another area of research that we're going on with. Kenwood and Roger adjustments for fixed effects. Robin's got some really clever ideas about computationally efficient ways of implementing that. He has some ideas about MC, and I don't know much about that work. That's more to do with Brian. Improved iterative schemes for estimating variance parameters. Now this is work, and I think people have been talking about EM, MC. There are all sorts of potentially hybrid EM AI schemes, and we've had a go at various things, but there's always ways of improving it. I've got another thing up there is an AS-REML paper, which was a naughty thing because that's something that Robin's been waiting on for quite some time. And ... there'll be other things along the way, I'm sure. Okay, let them grow. This is Robin's famous comment about students of Brian's. So the next couple of slides are students that Brian has had largely. I've got one claim to fame a bit later on. And they're students with whom Robin has had involvement either formally as a co-supervisor or has certainly helped encourage them. And Robin is incredibly patient and generous with his time with all of these people and trying to help them along the way. And as Brian has a tendency to be fairly excited and over-exuberant with some of the students, Robin always pulls him back and says, you've got to let them grow. They have to do their own thing. And so that's been a valuable lesson. And as you'll see, most of these topics. They are related to analysing plant breeding data, and a lot of them have resulted with joint papers with Robin, and they are just papers straight out of the PhD. Some of that has gone on to do extra work as well. And we keep going with other PhD students, going right through until current time. You can see there's quite a range of topics, and Robin's had input into all of these. And finally, we've got with Luke, which is that's still ongoing. And as I say, Robin's patience and tolerance and generosity of time with all of these students is quite amazing. Wouldn't be complete without talking about, we've spoken about ASTROML, the software package. Another key thing is obviously if you want to use this software package, and we use it a lot obviously, you need to have some documentation to help you use it. And Robin has been a great advocate to get this documentation out there. And so together with Bev Gogol, who would love to be here today but unfortunately couldn't, Robin acted as editor, so he became, we call the sticky note king. He was really into editing this documentation, and ended up being this lovely documentation and navigating from one version to the next. So all of this is interspersed with lots of visits either of us to Robin or Vicky Verka. And a lot of those visits are tied in with conferences and whatnot. And the conferences, there's always entertainment. As I say, fun, laughter, unpredictability. My first experience with Robin at a conference was way back in 1999 at a conference in Australia, in Lorne. Unfortunately, Robin had come and he was not feeling all that well. And he was giving a talk. He had, the old acetates, handwritten things and a projector, and he gave this talk, and afterwards we're all chatting, and I don't know how it came up, but somehow I sort of said, oh look, it's unfortunate that no one could actually see the slides, and Robin said, well, what do you mean? And I said, well, actually you were standing in front of the projector the whole time. And so basically this is what it looked like for most of the talk. And then he was quite upset that I hadn't actually stopped in the middle of the talk and said anything. But I was way too polite and cowardly at that point. Another conference was in Baton Rouge. And this was a talk, we had two presentations, and Robin was giving one of them. And I'd actually prepared the slides for him. And when he got up to do the talk, it was clear that he'd actually never even seen the slides. And so he was sort of standing there and turning around and reading for a while, and then we would get going on them. And it was very impressive because he was just reading it and going along as he went. And a more recent thing, and I guess maybe we've had some evidence of that here today, or not that much, is that whenever you're giving a talk and you know Robin's in the audience, it's a very nerve-wracking experience because you just don't know what's going to happen at the end in discussion time. And at this particular conference, which is a lovely shot of the people attending the conference, Robin didn't heckle all of these people, but there were a couple who got a little bit of a grilling, but possibly a deserved grilling. So yeah, fun, lots of things happening, but it's always inspirational, and we've always gained a lot out of these visits. And people have spoken about today with bits of newspaper and envelopes. For us, it's often boarding passes. Because we're such a long way away in Australia, it ends up that Robin's gems come via writing on a boarding pass. And as I say, all these visits, we've had lots of fun, lots of things have gone on. These are just a bit of a snapshot of some of the places where we've had meetings, and thanks to Bev Gogol for some of these photos. Top left, we've got Brian and Robin looks like a pub somewhere. Top right, Brian and Robin in front of a giant spruce tree. I think this is when Brian and Robin gave a course in Canada. And it is quite interesting that the clothing looks fairly similar from one photo to the next, even though they're quite a few years apart, I think. Bottom left with Robin looking really excited. This is my family had a visit to Rothamsted, and it was my daughter's birthday. And finally, we were lucky enough to attend Robin's wedding last year, and this is the sort of the Australian group there, which was a wonderful day. Now, okay, I've gone through a lot of our work that we've done with Robin, and obviously the title of the talk was all about contribution to the grains industry. And really it's about the fact that jointly working with Robin has resulted in developing methodology that's made or had an enormous impact on the grains industry. And I've got two quotes here from the CEOs of two of the largest private plant breeding companies in Australia. And so you get the idea here that this methodology, which was done, Robin had an integral part in this methodology, has had a huge impact on the grains industry. And Robin for us is kind of omnipresent. Hardly a day goes by when Brian will have solved some problem and he'll make reference to some cryptic remark that Robin will have made, or we'll be working on something and we'll say, oh, I bet Robin would like this, or I bet Robin wouldn't like this. So he's a very important part of what we do, and it's been an honour and a privilege to have had that relationship, and we hope that continues into the future. And we sincerely congratulate him on this well-earned award that he's receiving tomorrow. So thank you.